Street Banter interview with Jason Hirsh. 18 strikeouts in the game in college, second round draft pick, Texas League Pitcher of the Year, PCL Pitcher of the Year, starting pitcher of the Futures All-Star Game, Major League pitcher for the Astros and the Rockies. We got Jason Hirsh on the line here. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm glad you guys read off that Wikipedia profile because the rest of it's not.
We do the deep dive in over here.
Clearly, you guys are doing your research. I like it.
I was gonna say, did you edit the Wikipedia page yourself or what?
I plead the fifth.
It's an impressive one if it was you.
Somebody did it. I don't know. It wasn't me. It's one of those things where it's like, wow, you have a Wikipedia page. Like, I don't know if that's like when you know you've officially made it, if you have a Wikipedia page. But I remember the first time that I realized that I had one, I was like, wow, I'm actually like on there. That's kind of cool.
Right. The World Series was no big deal, but you got home and said, I got a Wikipedia page.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I mean, maybe one day Blake Street Banter will have their own Wikipedia page.
Maybe.
Do you know somebody that can make it for us?
I'm going to go right now while we're doing this, while you guys are talking. I'm going to Wikipedia to make a page for you.
Boys, we made it. We're good.
You're official.
That's awesome. Again, thank you for being here. Thank you for coming on. You do have a great track record. When did you, I kind of want to start at the beginning. When did you know you had like major league stuff? Like, I've never experienced that kind of greatness, like just knowing that I was going to have it and be there and get to that point. And I just really want to live vicariously through you. Like, when did you know?
Well, I don't know if I ever really knew. I know that from the time I was a little kid, I always said that I wanted to be a Major League Baseball player. And you can go back and my parents have schoolwork that, you know, it says, what do you want to be when you grow up? And people wrote fireman or astronaut or whatever it was, you know, when you're in third, fourth grade. I always wrote, I want to be a Major League Baseball player. And, you know, I always kind of kept that in the back of my head that was something I wanted to do. And obviously, you know, it's way more difficult now to do it than it was back when I did it, even though obviously it wasn't, you know, the easiest thing in the world, especially the path that I took. But, you know, when I went to high school to play baseball. I also got a great education, but it just happened to be the reason that I wanted to go to that specific high school at St. Francis was because they had a great baseball program. And little did I know that, you know, my time at St. Francis, that I would have 3 different coaches in 4 years. And, you know, we really wouldn't be that good of a ball club. But, you know, looking back on that time, you know, we faced a lot of adversity. We weren't always the best. I didn't always have the greatest outings. And I think a lot of that carried over to my professional career, where I was able to deal with some adversity, especially when, you know, when things weren't going well, whereas maybe somebody else in my shoes who had always gone to the best high school and the most winningest whatever would never have been able to accomplish that. I chose Cal Lutheran because, again, another great baseball program, but for me, it was an opportunity to play. I wanted to go play at Arizona State. That was like my dream school. They wanted me to go to a JUCO and transfer, and I had heard too many horror stories about transferring and losing credit. So I decided that Cal Lu was the best opportunity for me to just play. I just wanted to get on the field and play. And, you know, God willing, the chips fall where they may, and I might end up where I want to be. And 3 years later, they fell right into place exactly where I wanted to be. And I ended up getting drafted and you know, having a major league career. So, you know, the path that I took wasn't probably the most storybook path, but it was one that worked for me, and one obviously that we, you know, at our facility here in Denver that we're promoting to our athletes, that it really doesn't matter where you play, that if you're good enough, they're going to find you.
Right. Especially with the way social media is now, if you get your talent out there, the sky's the limit.
Yeah, social media has changed the recruiting game immensely. You know, obviously when I played, we didn't have social media. I didn't have Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or any of those other things. I think the internet was really just kind of in its infancy in terms of how we promote ourselves and how we do things. And, you know, it was basically word of mouth. You know, a coach or a recruiter or a scout, you know, hears from somebody like, oh, there's this guy, he throws really hard, you should go take a look at him. And so they'd have to go do a lot of fact finding. And nowadays, you know, just I pull my phone out and I go to Twitter and look at Flat Ground app, and I can see any number of, unsigned high school arms or college arms around the country, all throwing, ridiculously hard with disgusting off-speed stuff. And, I've got friends, former teammates that are pitching coaches at major Division I schools and all the way down to D3s. And, they're scouring YouTube and social media for the diamond in the rough, a guy who's fallen through the cracks. And so it's become immensely easier to get seen as a high school or collegiate athlete now than it's ever been. And obviously we have a ton more data. We have a ton more access to things. And so it makes it a lot easier to get yourself, known if you're a small West Coast kid trying to get to an East Coast school or vice versa, or anywhere in between. You're basically one tweet or one Instagram post away from signing somewhere.
Yeah, I went from, who you knew to, we talked to a guy that got signed by the Rockies that posted something on Pitching Ninja, and next thing you know, he's got a early contract. So, I
mean, shit, look at the guy that, I'm sorry, am I allowed to curse on this program?
Yeah.
Okay.
You are absolutely
okay.
Look at
we marked the
Fair enough.
explicit.
I see we're drinking wine, so clearly the alcohol rule is not in effect. I mean, think about the kid who was throwing at the speed pitch was it Oakland? And he threw like 96 on the speed pitch and they signed him, or was it Chicago or somewhere like that? I mean, just the most benign thing, you go viral. Next thing you know, you're in a major league uniform. So it's clearly possible to do just about anything nowadays.
So like you work with the fast baseball development stuff. Like, do you search for people like that and like develop them, or do they come to you? How does that all work? Yeah,
so we are a development facility. We don't run teams here. That would be really easy for us to do in kind of a sort of way. Teams are really not that easy. There's a lot of work that goes into them, but from a revenue standpoint, they're obviously very good for facilities. But we chose to go the player development route. We like to have athletes that come to us and say, hey, I want to throw harder, develop a new pitch, or my arm is injured, hurt, I'm coming off of surgery or whatever it might be. And so we take pride in, our ability to get them back on the field, or, develop them and take them to new heights that they didn't realize were possible, and go on and, have major league aspirations, or continue to have major league aspirations. So, whether that's going to the college of their choice, or even just going to play college baseball. I mean, you talked about such a minuscule number of athletes, of high school athletes, that actually get to go on and play college baseball. I think the number is somewhere around 11% of high school athletes play college baseball. So, it's not everybody gets to do it. So, having an opportunity for one of our athletes to go on and play it, no matter what level it is, junior college or Division I, II, III, NAI, it doesn't matter. That's a feather in our hat to allow those athletes to continue pursuing their dreams. And so that's the route that we've chosen to do at our facility.
And how did that start? Like, is that kind of towards the end of your major league career? Is that something that you thought about going down?
Yeah, so that was it was the culmination of the oh shit moment. What do I do now that I can't play baseball anymore? I was in Amarillo, Texas, playing independent league on a surgically repaired shoulder, trying to figure out a path back to the major leagues, or to organized baseball, even just get a minor league job somewhere. And me realizing that was going to constantly be an uphill battle because of the nature of my injury. If I had Tommy John, let's just say, my road back to the big leagues potentially would have been much simpler or easier. But shoulder injuries are like the kiss of death. So, you have a shoulder injury and you're too high of a risk and not high enough of a reward for a lot of ball clubs. So, I'm in Amarillo and I've got a bunch of green behind the ears, fresh out of college, type players that I'm playing with that, have never really experienced anything like pro ball. And some of them are struggling. Some of them are asking for advice. And, for me, I've always prided myself on how I prepared and things that I did away from the field. And that was, for me, was becoming more of a burden that I wasn't quite sure what was going on. But when one of those green players would come to me and say, hey, Jace, can you watch a bullpen, or, give me some advice on this, that, or the other. And then they'd go out there and have success. I started getting that same sense of joy and fulfillment that I used to have preparing myself to play and even playing the game itself. And so I started to kind of in my mind transition my thinking from maybe I should change my hats here and go from the player to more of a coach, because I was having success doing it in just that small sample size. And I was getting that joy and fulfillment that I would have gotten from doing it myself. And then I got traded down to El Paso after the first season. And I remember driving from Amarillo to El Paso thinking to myself, what on God's green earth are you doing right now? Why are you driving 10 hours to some godforsaken hellhole? No offense, you're a great city. In my mind, that was what was going on. I'm like, I'm going to stay, basically in a Motel 6 staring into Juarez, trying to pursue my major league career again. And I've got a wife and 2 kids at home. And so I started seeing the writing on the wall. I had a very long discussion with my agent and my wife to try and convince me not to stay. And at the end of the day, I said, you know what, it's time for me to come home. And I felt in that moment, I felt very content in my decision. I had accomplished quite a bit in my career from, obviously, being a second round draft pick to, making my major league debut, to going to a World Series and then having a catastrophic injury and kind of filling every void in between those things. And I said, I've done quite a bit in a very short amount of time that most players probably are never going to experience in their careers. And so I decided that I packed up my stuff and I drove back up here to Denver. And I met with somebody, a friend of mine who came at a recommendation like, hey, will you give my kid a lesson or something like that? And I did. And I started having fun with it. Next thing you know, I had a team. And then next thing you know, I'm working at a facility. And then I started what was cleverly known as the Jason Hirsh Pitching Academy. And I leveraged my celebrity and my name for a number of years before ultimately we switched over to FAST. And FAST was an acronym for a program that we ran called Foundational Arm Strength Training. And it just seemed like a natural transition as my celebrity started to fade, as the 07 season got further and further in the rear view. We needed to focus on the purpose of what we were doing there, which was, arm care and conditioning and developing athletes. And so that's ultimately why we went with FAST. And we've been doing it for, I think this is my 9th year that we've been doing it. 13 was my first year doing it. And so I now have employees. I've got my own facility. So it's grown pretty nicely. And I've allowed a little bit of control to be let go into other people's hands and feel very comfortable doing it with most of them. And so, yeah, at the end of the day, it's been a very joyful and fulfilling endeavor, and we continue to look to grow.
What's more difficult, pitching in a major league game or being a business owner?
Well, I certainly enjoy the paychecks of the major leagues a lot better than I enjoy the paychecks of being a small business owner. There's a lot more paperwork. I answer a lot of emails. I do the web design for us. I do graphic design for us. So I wear a lot of hats. Actually, in college, I was a graphic design major or multimedia major. So I dabbled in web design. I dabbled in graphic design. So I did a little bit of that. So I guess I've saved my company, let's just call it millions over the years in doing my own web design and graphic work. And I definitely don't enjoy running payroll. I don't enjoy answering emails all day. And I don't enjoy the administrative work. I definitely enjoy being on the floor, learning more stuff. I mean, the world of pitching and baseball development and hitting, all that, it's so fast to evolve, and there's so much data and information. There's so many great resources out there. I just don't have time to read all of it, read the next Fangraphs blog or, the next Driveline blog or, scour through baseball savant data and develop stuff. It's just, there's so much. And I try and nip off little pieces here and there and keep myself informed. But at the end of the day, I'd have to have my own sabbatical and spend some time digging down deeper into it just because it's evolved so fast.
Would you say, what's like the one thing that's been consistent, like as a coach on the development side since early 2000s when you were in high school to what you see now, like from a coaching development perspective? Like, what's been that consistent piece?
The most consistent piece is the daily reminder that I still don't know everything. That, you know, everybody, I mean, bodies are so unique. Arm actions are so, I mean, there's a fun saying in baseball is that every time you're on a field, no matter how many times you've been there, how many years, decades, you know, that you've been on a baseball field, you're always capable of seeing something new every time you're out there.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it's the same thing in the player development world. Just when I think I've seen it all, something walks through the door and I go, wow, I'd never seen that before. That's impressive. How did you do that? And let's work on fixing it. There's definitely a lot of commonalities. We see a lot of similar things come through, you know, especially when it pertains to injury, overuse injury, ligament injuries, muscle tears, things like that. I mean, that's pretty much standard issue, you know, to come through our doors at any given point. But I mean, the coaching world is ever evolving. You know, I think when I first started doing this, I taught the way that I was taught. So my pitching coach when I was a kid was a guy named Mike Boyd. Mike Boyd's brother was Oil Can Boyd. If you're a baseball aficionado, you know who Oil Can is. He pitched, I think he's still pitching. He's got to be freaking 70 years old. But so Mike was very hands-on and very mechanical in certain ways that he taught me. And so I started teaching in that very same method where, you know, I would get in there and physically manipulate arms, bodies, whatever it is. And then, you know, I'd go to the old towel drill or some chair thingy. And, you know, because I didn't know any better, right? I was, you know, just teaching kids the way that I was taught. And the basic started around, you know, from an arm care standpoint was the Jaeger bands. And Alan Jaeger is one of my mentors. And so I would teach that along with kind of this old school methodology. And then my students are actually the ones that kind of pushed me into the new age of baseball development. They kept asking about weighted balls. Hey, coach, what do you know about weighted balls? I'm like, they scare me. What else do you want me to tell you? And they kept asking. And finally I was like, all right, I'm going to call Jaeger. So I called Alan. I said, Al, what do you know about weighted balls? And he said, I'll tell you what, call this guy, Kyle Bodie, up at Driveline in Seattle and talk to him. So I reached out to Kyle and I actually ended up speaking with Mike Rathwell, who's their CEO up there. We had a great conversation for about 45 minutes and went through a whole bunch of stuff. And I said, you know what, I'm going to go and read through all of the stuff that they've been doing. They had written 4 years worth of blogs at that point. I went back and I read every single one of them. And then I decided to buy a set of balls and put myself through the program, knowing that, you know, if I broke, no big deal. I'm already broken. It's not going to hurt me anymore. But if one of my students were to break, that would weigh heavy on my conscience. And I couldn't do that to them. So I put myself through this program and I had a blast. My arm felt amazing. I was having fun training again. I got back off the bump and I was like 85, 86 and feeling like $1 million and was pulling down at 91 and like just feeling like a ball player again. I was like, all right, we're going to start doing this with our kids. And, you know, we kind of slowly started integrating some of the drills. And next thing you know, we're 2 feet jumping in and the rest is history, right? It's one of those, like, I chased the rabbit down the hole, right? I started with Alan. He led me to Driveline. Driveline led me to like the Texas Baseball Ranch. The Texas Baseball Ranch led me to, you know, Austin Washman back on the East Coast at AB Athletics. And next thing you know, like social media is blowing up with all this stuff. And, you know, it's an endless chase of information. Then for me, it was compiling what are the important things for me. And, you know, how do I start applying those to my athletes? How do I communicate that information effectively to them so that they can understand it? And then put some of their fears at rest. You know, when someone says, oh, I'm going to make you throw a weighted ball, you're like, whoa, time out here, partner. What do you mean you're going to make me throw a weighted ball? And that kind of dangerous. And so, you know, being able to explain that stuff, the science that goes behind it, you know, was really important. And then obviously, you know, growing as a facility and learning all the new technology that's come out since then, things like Rapsodo and, you know, now you've got Pitch AI that's doing biomechanics in your pocket and, you know, just kind of dabbling in all those different things. It's been fun to watch it grow, but it's also, like I said, it's very daunting to try and keep up with it.
Yeah, it's probably overwhelming. Like, so, I mean, data obviously is a huge part of what you do. Like, is there any like certain data points that you look for in a pitcher that just kind of, I don't know, just like that stand out to you that?
Yeah, so we do an eval with all of our new students, and we go through our warm up protocols. You know, we use weighted balls. We take video of them doing the drills, and then we'll throw them up on the mound, and I'll throw a bullpen on Rapsodo. And we were an early adopter on Rapsodo. We've had one for, I think we're going on 5 years now, 4 years, something like that. So we've had it for quite a while, and we've become very effective at using it and relaying information. So we'll have them throw a 20-25 pitch bullpen, throw all their pitches, fastball, curveball, slider, change, whatever you got, knuckleball, splitter, I don't care. And then, you know, what we're looking for we're looking at obviously velocity, just trying to get a baseline, figuring out how hard you throw. We look at spin efficiencies to see how well balls are spinning. You know, fastballs, we want high spin efficiencies, you know, sliders, we want low spin efficiencies, curveballs, changeups, high spin efficiencies. And then we're just looking at movement profiles and going, all right, you know, how does your fastball move? How does your curveball move? Actually, one of the biggest issues that we see is a high school athlete who says, well, I throw a curveball, and they throw a curveball and it spins just like a slider. I'm like, no, that's great. You throw a slider. He's like, oh, I've never thrown a slider. I'm like, well, you've never thrown a curveball either. So we're going to have to figure out one way or another which one you're throwing. Because I'm going to tell you right now, the Rapsodo tells me you don't throw a curveball. So then we get to work. And then we say, all right, based off what you've told me, and most kids come in here saying, well, I want to throw harder. Then we say, okay, so here's the protocols, here's the plan. And it's a multi-month thing. I think a lot of kids don't realize that velocity is not instant results. You know, I can pull my phone out of my pocket and find something right now. Our bodies don't work the same way. It takes many months for us to develop, you know, the right muscle, the right muscle memory, the right ability to, you know, execute such a very fine motor skilled motion, a very high speed, high rate of speed. And that stuff is not easy. You've got to force your body into it and train it consistently to see the results that you want to see. And, you know, some of the kids that we tell that to, I'm like, listen, you know, you're talking about a fraction of a mile per hour every week is what we're aiming for. Because at the end of the day, you know, if we look at it from a 12-month calendar, I said in 12 months, I want you to gain 5 miles an hour. That's not a lot. When you think about it in 52-week increments, I mean, you're talking about getting a 10th here or 10th there. You know, how well are you sleeping? How well are you eating? You know, how much are you lifting and training? And then how well are we doing on our throwing protocols? All of that plays into it. So getting them to understand that, and then realizing that, yeah, this is going to be a process, but the results of that process are going to be a lot of fun. And, you know, this past year we were, you know, fortunate and unfortunate, obviously with all COVID stuff, it's kind of really screwed over a lot of baseball seasons. But on the other side, it's given players a lot of extra time to train that they didn't have before. And so for a lot of our athletes from the fall up until now, when they're just getting ready to start for their seasons, I think we had in facility roughly 16 or so high school kids, and they all gained on average about 5 miles an hour since the fall. That's pretty impressive gains over such a large group. And then a lot of that is attributed to they had nothing better to do. They came in and they trained. I'm like, this is the perfect example of what can happen if you do something consistently with a goal in mind. And so that's where we're at. And that's kind of, again, that's just kind of how we've grown and you know, what our players are looking for when they come in.
You're spending a lot of time developing young arm talent and a lot of people with high potential. Now, what kind of advice do you have for a 32-year-old male that's playing Sunday league, you know, top 72,
right?
Slow loop and curveball, you know, what do you got for me?
So first, don't neglect the arm care, right? Jaeger bands they're cheap. You can go to Dick's Sporting Goods and pick up a set in the baseball section for like $35. Start with that. And then continue to have fun, continue to have a passion for the game. Forget about the metrics, go out there and play it. You know, I think I try and explain this to our you know, the parents that email me of their 6 and 8 year old who they think needs private pitching lessons. your son or your daughter or whoever it is needs to develop a passion for the game first. One that, the three of you and obviously we all have. Develop a passion for the game first before making it a serious commitment. And then once you've decided that, you know what, this is something that I want to do, now we can spend a little bit of extra time and a little bit of extra capital and invest in the player development side. But, for you as a 32-year-old, I think you said 32. I don't want to get it wrong here.
Right. Yes.
So as a 32-year-old, former leaving, maybe being an athlete, I'm not quite sure. I've never seen you.
That's not good. It's
All right. I just say is you're playing now. Obviously, I see a Denver Brown shirt. So clearly you guys are connected to the NABA universe. Continue to play, continue to have fun, enjoy yourself, right? You're not going to be able to do this forever. Or maybe you will. I don't know. You know what? There's the 65 and over league. There was a guy. So there used to be a facility here in town called Here to Play. It was up off 65th in Washington. It's no longer there, but they had a field in the back, and they used to have this old timers like division that they would play. And this guy would come down from Fort Collins. He was like, I want to say he was 70, 80 years old. And he had to play 2 of 3 games on the weekend. Otherwise, it wasn't worth his time. But he came down and he played every inning of those 2 games because he had a passion for the game. And I said, you know what? I wish when I get to be your age that I still love this game as much as you do. So as a 32-year-old playing NABA, continue to enjoy the game. Do not lose sight of that. It is still a lot of fun to play.
absolutely. It's
Sorry, that was a really long-winded answer, but at the end of the day, keep your passion and pass that along to others, because this next generation of athletes, I'll tell you what they don't do. They don't watch the game enough and they don't pay attention to it enough. They just play it and then they go on and do other things.
You're absolutely right. Absolutely right.
So
let's dive into this career of yours. So you were
it's
drafted.
short. This will be quick.
we got some highlights. I watched.
All
I
right,
read your
all
wiki, man. Come on.
That's right. The wiki.
No, so you were drafted in the second round by the Astros. Did you ever get a chance to meet Nolan Ryan?
I
And
did.
if you did you get any advice or any cool stories like talking to him?
So I did get to meet him. So after my it was my first year of pro ball. I think it was my first year. It may have been my second year. The Astros ran something called this Elite Pitchers Camp. It was held in Houston at Minute Maid, and Nolan Ryan was one of the I guess guest instructors. It was over the weekend, and so we rolled in there, and I got to throw a bullpen on the game mound at Minute Maid with Nolan Ryan standing behind me, watching with our pitching coordinators, Dewey Robinson. And I got done, and Dewey looked at Nolan and said, "So, Nolan, what do you think?" And Nolan goes, "Looks good." That was it. That's all I got out of him.
What was that like?
Good.
Was that the highlight of your life at that point?
And to that point, it was for sure. I mean, just pitching in front of Nolan Ryan obviously is a cool thing, but getting to meet him and interact with him a little bit. He has a very, very deep Texas drawl, and I remember listening to him speak for the first time, going, "I'm not quite sure that's English." But I'm picking out a few words. And then once I got used, like listening to an Irish accent, like, one of my instructors said I should watch this show called Dairy Girls. And I'm watching, I'm like, I got nothing. I don't even understand. I'm not even sure this is English. He goes, watch it with subtitles. It's a lot better. So I kind of felt like I needed subtitles for Nolan. But once I kind of got around him and got to listen to him a little bit, you can understand him a lot easier. But very, very nice guy. His wife also was extremely nice, and we had some when I was in AAA with the Astros, we had a barbecue before the season started at one of their investors' houses or something, like ranches in Texas. And he walked around. He was the nicest guy. I was like, "Hey, Nolan, can I play catch with you? Like, I just want to throw." He goes, "I haven't thrown a ball in however long. I've got bad knees and this, that, and the other." I'm like, All right, I guess that's you're
Just the
Nolan.
once, please.
Yeah, like, and then I think a couple years later, he was throwing the first pitch out of the game, throwing like 85 or some ridiculous number. I'm like, all right, Whaler. Either way, I got to experience and hang around him. He was an awesome dude. It's something I'll never forget that, and I'll never trade it for anything either.
That reminds me of Mac off Sunny in Philadelphia, where he's trying to have a catch with Chase Utley.
I just want to catch.
I met Chase. I've met Chase Utley one time too. It was at my agent's office. He came in and it's like totally nonchalant surfer dude.
I could see that. I could see Chase doing that.
Yeah.
All right. So do you know what is it called? The 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon or 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon?
Yeah. 6 degrees of separation, but yes, we can do
yes,
you can do the Kevin Bacon thing too.
Something like that. So anyway, Aaron and I, we met Clint Hurdle once.
Okay.
2007. I think I was 18. Aaron, you had to been 20 or something.
I had a beer. I think it was 21.
Yeah. So anyway, 2007, going to the game 163, whatever it was. One of the best experiences ever. But the next year we met, and he's I was really nervous because I was kind of a young guy and I've never met, a big league player or anything like that. And I said I was kind of nervous under my breath, and Clint Hurdle kind of took me aside and said, "We're just regular people, man. Like, it's no big deal."
So at the end of the day, Clint can be very intimidating too because he's so loud.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
And
his nickname was Loudmouth Soup, and because he only had one tone of voice.
Right. And I just like kind of barely said that. And like he took me out in front of this big group and he's like, "Oh, don't be nervous. We're just regular people," And it was just one of the coolest experiences ever because it was like, just normal people. We're just out here playing a game and all this stuff. So I'm just curious kind of like what that clubhouse was like, what it's like being around Clint, just was it nice, easy flowing like that?
Yeah. So, that 07 clubhouse was definitely special. And I think there's something to be said about clubhouse chemistry and the right mix of guys. I mean, we certainly had it in 07. When I got traded to the to the Rockies from the Astros, it was a bit of a gut punch for me. Because I was, I had just come up in 06 and I was really anticipating being part of this, great organization with storied history and I had familiarity with everybody there. And so when I got the phone call that I had been traded, I didn't have a very good feeling. And one of the very first phone calls, if not the very first phone call I got after I got traded was from Clint. And he was very, assuring, very comforting, welcoming me to the family. And then I continued to get phone calls from the coaching staff, from Dan O'Dowd and from Rick Matthews and Bob Apodaca, and, all just kind of welcoming me to this organization that I knew nothing about. I knew none of them. I knew no coaches. I didn't know anything, and I wasn't really sure what to expect or what was going to go on. So, getting to Colorado was it felt a lot better the first day I walked in there because I felt like I kind of already knew those guys just based off their initial interactions with me. And then getting to know Clint, Clint at that point, obviously he was very loud, boisterous. And he always seemed to have some kind of a comforting quote or inspirational saying or something like that. Like he kept a book or something like that on his table. And he had everything earmarked for like, "Oh, you're feeling sad. Let me flip it over to this chapter. Like, here's a sad quote." Things like that. I just felt like, early on, I think that really worked. As my time in Colorado grew, I felt like there was a little bit more of a disconnect. Like I didn't quite get the real Clint Hurdle. And come to find out years later, when I was doing TV work for Root and he was with the Pirates, he was a completely different type of coach. And listen, we all go through learning, phases as coaches and even as players or any other profession that we choose. We're always learning from our mistakes. And I think one thing Clint realized was that he needed to be more sincere and genuine in how he talked with people and not just give them some inspirational this, that, or the other. And so, I ran into him at the clubhouse when he was with Pittsburgh and, big bear hug and, "Oh, how's your family?" and blah, blah, blah. And he felt a lot more warm. Like he put off a much better aura. And then he came out to the Rocky Mountain Saber banquet that we had a few years back. And he gave one of the all-time greatest, just inspirational speeches. I was going to run through a brick wall for that guy that night. Like, it just, very, from the heart, humbling. You could tell that baseball had taught him a lot. So, we got a little bit of Clint in his infancy as a manager. Obviously, as a coach, he had a very storied history as a coach, and a lot of guys in the ball club respected him as a hitting coach, as a fielding instructor, on-field, instructor. So that was definitely good. The clubhouse was a nice mix, right? We had veteran guys, Todd, obviously, guys like Tori Alba. We had young guys like me and Taylor Buckholtz and Troy Tulowitzki and Ryan Spilborgs. We all kind of filled our various roles on the team, right? Obviously, Todd was the old, bitter, veteran who'd been around through numerous, quote unquote rebuilds and god awful seasons. Guys like Holiday and Hop were kind of the future of the organization that were, showing very promising stars. Tulo at that point, when I got there in 07, was just a rookie, right? He had a lot of promise to him. I played with him in the futures game. So, he had some hype behind him. And then there were guys like LaTroy Hawkins, who I still speak with, and Matt Hergis. And, so you had a mix of veteran guys. You also had a very good, like Tori Alba, we had a great Latin contingent on that team too. So even though we had our factions within the clubhouse, we always had guys that would bridge those factions, that were able to communicate. So Tori Alba was like the liaison to the Latin American players. Ryan Spilborgs was kind of like the liaison between the young guys and the older guys. And then guys like Brad Hopp and Garrett Atkins and Matt Holiday were kind of the in-between between the veterans and the young guys, the guys that were, had established themselves as, as future stars in the game. And so there was a really good chemistry in that clubhouse. We all held each other to account. We had a lot of fun. We did a lot of, rookie hazing type things that, got everybody to laugh and have a good time. And so I think a lot of that played into how well we performed at various points throughout the season. Obviously, the end of the season was the best part of the year, but I think the early part of the season, we were all just kind of figuring each other out. Like, who's this Hirsch guy, and why did we get rid of our best pitcher for him? And who's this Tulo guy, and why is he this promising young star? And why did we bring in LaTroy Hawkins? He hasn't been relevant in the last however many years. So it was just kind of figuring all those things out. And then once we all figured each other out, we started having a lot more fun and playing a little bit better baseball.
Yeah, I think that September was probably the greatest month in Denver sports history.
Oh, hands down.
Oh yeah, we had no idea. We were floating on the ground the whole damn time. I mean, I remember a game, we come back, I think it was against the Marlins. We were down like 7 runs or something like that. We came back and won. And we were walking up the stairs back to the clubhouse, and Francis looked over at me and he goes, "How are we going to win tomorrow?" Like, it was just one of those things, like, who's gonna do it tomorrow? Are we going to pitch tomorrow? Are we going to hit tomorrow? Like, which one is it? Because, during that run, we would go down by a boatload of runs, and the offense would dig us out of that grave, or the offense, couldn't hit their way out of a wet paper bag, and the pitching would sit there and hold tight until somebody came through. It was a weird dynamic, but somebody was always pulling the right end of the rope, for that last month and a half.
Yeah, that was an amazing year, and we're all like primarily Rockies fans here, so that's kind of our.
You guys weren't in diapers back then, right? You're 32, so that makes it like 07. That was a long ass time ago.
But it's gonna be pretty cool for you that you're kind of part of that alumni of that season. That's going to be in history for, ever for that franchise.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm very blessed and fortunate to do what I did in such a short amount of time in the big leagues, right? I got less than 2 years in the big leagues, and I've got something like 7 or 8 years in the minor leagues. And again, I was able to accomplish a lot of awesome things. Like I said, I won Pitcher of the Year awards, it was in AA and AAA. I was the first pitcher to ever do that until I think last season, 2 years ago. Who's the guy from St. Louis that did it? Benjamin Hockman called me about it. I can't remember who it is right now. But anyway, like I said, I did that awesome feat, and then I got called up to the big leagues, and I got to play on a World Series team, and then I went through a catastrophic arm. Like I said, I did a lot in a very short amount of time. So, to kind of be in the right place at the right time with the Rockies was obviously was a blessing. Like I never imagined that I would get there so fast, or be in that position so as quickly as I was. I figured, I'd be in the big leagues for 5 or 6 years and maybe never even taste the playoffs, let alone make the World Series my first full season there.
Yeah, that's you did kind of go. You went up and down all.
Oh yeah. Well, when I got
true.
called up to Houston in 2006, my teammates on that team were Roger Clemens, Andy Pettit, Roy Oswalt, Craig Biggio, Lance Berkman, Jeff Bagwell, Brad Ausmus. Like,
wow,
like a who's who of
that team, wasn't it? Wow.
Like potential Hall of Famers. And that's what I got thrown into right off the bat.
Hang on, wait, who's those guys?
Yeah, right. And so, but again, and talk about it was a gut punch. I'm like, I'm ready to go be a Houston Astro with like all of these Hall of Famers, these amazing players. And then they trade me to Colorado. I'm sitting there going, really? The Rockies? Like, who are these guys? I don't know anybody here. I know Coors Field's a laughing stock of the league, and they always have a bunch of nobodies. And here I am in the World Series with a whole bunch of nobodies.
I did kind of want to talk to you a
That's
little bit
hilarious.
about Coors Field a little bit. And like, did you notice a difference with your pitches in there? Because I know there was talk about like Trevor Bauer and stuff saying that his fastball broke a little bit differently and stuff like that. But did you notice anything like that for you personally?
Yeah. So the biggest difference for me at Coors Field was I stopped throwing my 2-seamer when I got there. And the reason I did that is because I call it the Colorado cutter. Is because however, and this is way before pitch tracking technology and StatCast and all that stuff. For whatever reason, the way it came off my hand, the ball would cut. And if I wanted a ball to sink, and let's just say I'm throwing Albert Pujols and I want a sinker down and in, and it cuts over the heart of the plate and he hits at a mile into left center, which he did, that's on me. So I stopped throwing a 2-seamer because I knew it was unpredictable. So I only threw 4-seamers at altitude and sliders and curveballs and changeups. But in terms of the field itself, I didn't feel like Coors Field played unfairly when I pitched. Anybody who hit a home run off of me at Coors Field would have been a home run in any other ballpark in the major leagues. The only time I really felt that it played unfairly was when the weather got hot. When it was exceptionally hot at Coors Field, I felt like the ball jumped quite a bit. But what kills you at Coors Field is the size of the field itself. The outfield is flipping enormous. And so that's where a single turns into a double, or a double turns into a triple, or what should be a bloop to somebody in the infield or the outfield falls in between a guy because guys are playing so far back. So it's just kind of learning the strategy of Coors Field and understanding what works for you at altitude. There are some players that come in here that say, well, I can't feel the ball, or, my stuff doesn't break the same. Honestly, I feel like that's a cop out. Like they've already kind of convinced themselves when they show up that they're just going to be shitty pitchers when they get here. And in reality, they're not. I mean, everything works the way. I mean, think about all the great pitchers who've ever walked through the doors at Coors Field. Pretty much every single one of them is still great at the end of the day. And it's not like it made or break broke their careers or even their seasons. So, they have to deal with it the same way that we have to deal with it. And so I didn't like to make excuses for it. I didn't feel like Coors Field treated me any more unfairly than, let's just say, Minute Maid did. And in my major league debut, I gave up 3 bombs to the Crawford boxes that should have been, that if they were at Coors Field would have landed, 150 feet short of the left field wall, but they were home runs that day. So, you can't be upset with the cards that you're dealt. You just got to make do with what you got. And, the same principles apply at altitude as they do every other place. If you change speeds and work fast and, throw hard and get ahead of guys, you're going to have success. And I think the Coors Field model for pitchers is evolved over the years. And maybe it hasn't evolved enough. I don't know. Maybe the metrics are going to point me in the wrong direction, but I feel like guys that have overpowering stuff with strikeout ability are going to have better success at altitude than guys who are sinker ball contact pitchers who are going to let Coors Field determine their success or failure.
Yeah, there might be something to that. Did you ever throw your two seamer on the at away games?
Oh, 100%. If I got down
Yeah.
to Miami or LA, you bet your ass I was throwing sinkers. Because again,
So you were really adjusted like every time.
Yeah, I mean, I just at the end of the day, it was can I run one in on somebody or underneath their hands, or do I have to make an adjustment with my four seamer to get it in there? And so at that point, as a big league pitcher, I was able to do that. Make those adjustments at home and on the road. I may have been more effective on the road with my fastball than I was at Coors Field, but I didn't really feel like it affected my approach in those games.
Right. Yeah. I do want to thank you for that refreshing sense of fresh air. Like exactly what you said. Like there's always an excuse, and that's just kind of where we are. Society.
To be honest with you, I'm sick and tired of the excuses of Coors Field and the Rockies and all that other bullshit that comes with it. It's one of those times. It's time to piss or get off the pot for them.
Mm-hmm.
And you either need to embrace it or you just need to be satisfied with the fact that they're going to be, a half-assed ball club for a long time, right? Or you can adopt to modern day metrics and development technologies and actually figure out what works there. And then again, there are great people that work for the Rockies and their coaching staff, and they're all trying to figure out the same thing. But as an outsider looking in and talking with people who've been within the organization as players, I know there's a lot of disconnect there right now. And that's a huge problem when it comes to putting a quality product on the field.
Right.
Yeah. It goes back to what you said earlier about having the right people in the clubhouse makes a huge difference. And that's kind of what it seems like we've been lacking for a while.
Well, and even by today's metrics, by today's standards, I mean, when you have your entire analytics team quitting, you had one of the smallest to begin with, but when you have the entire analytics team quitting on their own accord, as in getting out of the big leagues after they already got into it, you've got a huge problem there. And I think the Rockies themselves have not embraced that modern development philosophy and it's worked out to their detriment right now. And they're just not capable of developing and putting the right people in place that are going to give those highly touted draft picks an opportunity to have success at the next level when they're constantly being told conflicting ideas on how they should develop themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So I got a couple questions based off of that. So
I know I just opened up Pandora's box. Sorry.
I mean, just dive in as much or as little as you want to. But I mean, from your perspective, what kind of players does it take to be successful at Coors Field? I mean, not just pitchers, but position players. What kind of mentality, things like that. I mean, you hear, Chuck and some other guys talking about how the mentality is so different, going on the road and coming back and all of these things. I don't know what it's like. You have a little bit of taste of what that's like. So I'm just
right. So I think from a position player standpoint, the Rockies have it nailed. If they would probably be, I would say they're probably one of the better position player developing franchises in baseball, at least from a term of outfielders and maybe, left side of the infield, third base, shortstop. They've been pretty good at that over the years. One area that they've certainly lacked in is catching. They haven't been very good at developing catchers or even targeting the right kinds of catchers, whether it's in the draft or in free agency or from Latin America or whatever it might be. And obviously there's been a void at first base basically since Todd left. But, it seems like there's a revolving door of outfielders that can all hit, that all have decent power. They hit for decent average. And whether you're doing it on the road or not, yes, they're making adjustments. The area where I feel like they've struggled mightily, and I don't think they've ever done it well, is developing pitching. I think they're still trying to figure out what works at Coors Field. And, through the years, I've watched certain guys come through there, including myself. I mean, I was a sinker ball guy. I watched a guy like Jorge De La Rosa, dominate Coors Field with wipeout stuff and at times an overpowering fastball. And I'm sitting there going, the role model for developing pitchers is right there on the mound. Like, it seems to me that the overpowering arm, which the Rockies have quite a few of now, with wipeout stuff or strikeout ability, seems to be the way that you should be looking, or what you should be looking for. More of the swing and miss guys. you're going to give up your fair share of home runs at Coors Field. It's going to happen. Welcome to Colorado. You have to just be resigned to accepting that fact. But taking a power arm in the draft, I'm trying to think of names over the years Mike Nicorek, for example, was supposedly a can't miss guy, right? Or anybody else who these can't miss throwing prospects. And you take them into the minor leagues and you try and shove them into this cookie cutter and say, we're going to be a sinker ball pitcher with a wipeout slider, and that's what's going to have success at Coors Field. Well, modern day training and technology tells us that doesn't work for everybody. That, let's just say, for example, that James, you have a high spin rate fastball with a very vertical curveball or something along those lines. You're not going to be a sinker ball pitcher. You're not going to have success being a sinker ball pitcher. You're going to have success throwing fastballs up in the zone with nasty curveballs down in the dirt to get guys to swing and miss. And you should be able to tailor the development to that instead of saying, we're all going to throw sinker balls because we want to keep the ball down at Coors Field. It doesn't work for everybody that way. And I've talked to guys that have been in the minor leagues with the Rockies that have told me that they try and shove everybody into this mold, and out the back end is supposed to come a major league pitcher. And it works for a guy like Kyle Freeland because that's kind of what he is. He's a sinker slider guy. John Gray's got a plus fastball. He has pretty good wipeout slider / curveball, whatever he's calling it these days. But he also lacks some separation that could really make him an elite level pitcher by creating a little bit of a difference off his fastball, in terms of depth on some things that I think would help him out tremendously. So, it's just being able to look at those guys and recognize each individual has their own things that they do really well, and that those things should be exploited instead of trying to make everybody fit into this, for lack of a better example, let's Aaron Cook / Jeff Francis / Jason Hirsh type mold, where we're just going to throw sinkers and sliders and hopefully get away with it. So again, I think there's some disconnect there in just understanding, the players that you have in your system and how to make them or exploit them for the reason why they're as good as they are, or the reason why you decided to draft them in the first place.
Yeah, and the funny thing about De La Rosa, who's arguably the best pitcher in Rockies history, is he was a gift to the organization. I mean, he was kind of a washout guy from Kansas City, and then he shows up, and then
he was a player to be named. Right. He was a throw-in. Who's the best pitcher on the Rockies right now? German Marquez. He was a throw-in the Corey Dickerson trade.
Yes.
Right. Mm-hmm. And he's one of the best pitchers in Major League metrically one of the best pitchers in Major League Baseball.
Absolutely.
So, the guys that have had the most success here weren't developed here. If this Austin Gomer kid who came from St. Louis, if he shows up and is all of a sudden like this incredible pitcher for the Rockies, the Rockies can't sit there and pat themselves on the back and say, look what we did. They have to look at St. Louis and say, thank you for developing a pitcher that we can use. And there's a lot of examples out there that the Rockies can look towards, like St. Louis or Tampa or Kansas City or anybody that invests in these modern training tools and go, we could do that. It's not that hard. It's just, it takes getting the right people in place with the right knowledge that are able to communicate that effectively to the athletes. And there's a lot of very old school guys in the Rockies development system or development train that are still like, we need to do towel drills and run 2 miles a day. Well, modern baseball says that towel drills and running 2 miles a day are very counterproductive towards creating effective or developing effective pitchers, and that there are better ways to do things. And so you've just got to be willing to adapt to those things. And they've been very slow to do it. And I hope that in the future that they at least start considering that aspect of it, because the one area of Major League Baseball that you are not limited in how much money you can spend is in player development, right? You're limited on your roster and how much money you can pay certain guys, but I can go out there and spend $1 million on TrackMan and Rapsodo, or I can spend, $5 million and hire a 20-person analytics team to comb over this data and tell me what I've got and how do I apply that to my athletes.
That's the most frustrating thing about the organization, is the fact that They've never been a standout club in any of those areas, except for if you're a hitter, you love to go hit at Mile High. I mean, one inch, but that's just the byproduct of where you're at. That's not a part of the development system, right? So one of the things I'm most frustrated by is watching teams like the Oakland Athletics and the Tampa Bay Rays, who are small market teams, but yet their scouting departments are amazing. Their development is amazing. It's just so on and so forth. And then you watch, you know, the Rockies, who aren't even that small of a market team. They're middle of the club. I mean, you have, I mean, Monfort himself, he's taken for granted the fact that fans are going to show up no matter what, right?
Well, they've made Coors Field an experience.
Right. Yeah. The party deck. I mean, $3 beers before first pitch. Let's go. I mean,
well, it's cheap.
To say no to that.
It's cheap family entertainment. It's downtown. It's very convenient to go, you know, take your friends and hey, let's go grab a ball game, $5 seats in the rock pile. Then we're going to go hit up the Blake Street Tavern and drink our faces off and then Uber home. Like it's just part of it, right? You're not necessarily going to the ballpark to watch the ball game. You're just going to the ballpark to be in that atmosphere. And they, believe me, Coors Field is a beautiful ballpark, unbelievable atmosphere. They've done a phenomenal job of that. And, you know, there is a hardcore set of fan in Colorado. You know, obviously U3 would be part of that group that are going to go for the product on the field, not necessarily the experience that surrounds it. You know, and it takes more real baseball fans to make a stink about the product on the field, you know, and maybe the straw that breaks the camel's back is Nolan Arenado. Maybe that was the piece that finally gets fans to go, you know what, this sucks. We don't have the greatest third baseman in Major League history anymore. Isn't that amazing? Yeah. We don't have what purpose do we have now? We don't have a team identity. We don't have, you know, anything to really, you know, stick a feather in and go, that's our guy, right? Because Trevor's going to walk next year. If he's not gone by the All-Star break, you know, then what is your team identity at that point?
I was talking about that a little bit about how you know, we used to always have Todd Helton, and that was our, you know, year in, year out. At least we had him, and he stayed his whole career. But now it's like we can't even get guys to stay that long because they don't want to be a part of it.
Yeah, and I think it sends a message when you trade away a guy like Nolan, the way you treated him over the last couple of years, you know, it sends a message to all the other players in the organization that realistically, you're just here to get to the big leagues and then go seed other teams. Like, we're not going to really show you a ton of loyalty. There's no reason for you to have that loyalty to our brand. And, you know, I've talked with a lot of other people about this is you know, how do you change that? Well, it's a cultural thing, right? It has to start within the organization and at the top and work its way down so that everybody understands that we're all on the same team, that we're all pulling the same end of the rope. And right now they've got a culture problem. There's a huge disconnect between, you know, the front office, the general manager, and the ownership, the players and the coaches, and nobody's really got a cohesive message right now that would make you excited to want to be a Rocky long-term. You know, maybe 10 years ago, there was that excitement, but, you know, the last 4, 5, 6 years, you know, there really hasn't been a reason to remain loyal to the Rockies for anything, you know, because they're showing time and time again, you know, for one reason or another that, you know, you can be replaced by somebody cheaper or we don't have the money to really afford to keep you around. So sayonara.
All
right, and that's unfortunate because I think like, you know, like James, you had mentioned St. Louis, like there's tons of models out there that the Rockies can look at and go, we could do that. Like you could be a St. Louis where you've got an incredibly passionate fan base and you turn over, you know, new players every year, but still have loyalty to some of your bigger names. You can do the Tampa Bay model and turn over guys as soon as they hit arbitration because it's the next guy up. You know, when David Price left, you know, Blake Snell stepped in or, you know, whoever the next line, you know, whoever was the next in line of great arms to come out of Tampa Bay, you know, you have the capabilities of doing that. I feel like they do that with outfielders, but we haven't been able to do that with any other position yet.
Yeah. So I have a little bit of a theory here. So you have guys that are so passionate about winning all the time. That's all they care about. Guys like Tulowitzki, Arenado, that's what they want to do, right?
Right.
But you have people like Todd Helton. You have people like Charlie Blackmon that winning's nice, but at the same time, like, I like being an outdoorsman. I like going hunting and all of those things. And so, like, those guys were probably a little bit more loyal than they should have been. So am I kind of off track on thinking like those guys love to stay in Colorado and they tolerated the losing, even though they didn't want it, they didn't like it. But I mean, they'll put up with it to a certain extent because they like where they're at.
I don't know if I'd go that far. Listen, I don't know a single ball player in Major League Baseball who doesn't like winning. You know what I mean? Like, winning changes the attitude of everything. And the better ball clubs you're on, and the more you win, you know, the more fun you're going to have. You know, for a guy like Todd, you know, I think it was really important for Todd to remain loyal, just kind of the way he's built. You know, he wanted to, there's something to be said about somebody who spends their entire career with one organization, because it doesn't happen anymore, right? With free agent, everybody goes to chase money. And you know, and for a guy like Charlie, you know, maybe he felt like, you know, Colorado's the best place for him, and that therefore I want to be here. And you know, there's a very common theme. If you talk to any player in Major League Baseball, when they say, what do you think about coming to Colorado? They all will tell you hands down that Colorado is one of their favorite places to visit. They absolutely love everything about it, whether it's the field and the atmosphere, the clubhouse, the people, you know, downtown, you know, the hotels that they stay in, or just having the mountains there, whatever it is. They all, without a doubt, will tell you that they love Colorado. They just don't want to be here. They don't want to play here, right? They don't want to do it on a long-term basis. So how do you bridge that gap? How do you take a guy who loves coming to Colorado and visiting, and how do you show him that this can be a place where you can have success in your career? You know, and maybe part of it is the national media that kind of looks at Colorado as, well, they played, you know, it's basically junior varsity baseball up there at altitude, or, you know, the constant reminder that, you know, your numbers are being inflated here, therefore your career is not as cool as it would have been as if you were to do it in LA or Chicago or New York, or, you know, one of the more traditional baseball markets. So, you know, part of that is, I think that's part of the culture that we talked about earlier. And then part of it is, you know, explaining to people, you know, that yes, Colorado presents its own challenges, but I think with a guy like Larry Walker getting into the Hall of Fame as a Rocky, it opens the door to a lot of other ball players that have had great successful careers here that you can start to measure against other players. Because at the end of the day, you can't punish a guy like Todd for playing his entire career at Coors Field. He didn't choose to be drafted by the Rockies, but he did choose to show them loyalty and spend his entire career there. That shouldn't be held against him. If anything, it should be held as a bonus for spending his entire career in one place.
Yeah,
so
sure.
Like I said, there are some cultural things and some messaging things that I think the Rockies struggle with, or that's been really inconsistent over the years, that give it a bad name and a bad rap.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
These are just my personal opinions.
Yeah.
You know, obviously I didn't spend enough time here to really, you know, have a shitty career. I kind of took that upon myself to do that, but you know, just my short time playing here, I freaking loved it. I still live here. I have business here, you know, family. But I feel like I wish it could be so much more.
Yeah,
I really do.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like
we all do. We all do.
I really feel like if it was done right, with the right messaging, like going to Coors Field, you could have 50,000 there every night. Yeah. And you would have 50,000 like rabid baseball fans, not 20,000 rabid baseball fans and 30,000 drunk people.
Right. That's the frustration.
We've been talking about it for a hot minute now. The other Coors effect, and it's exactly what you just touched on. Like, there are people that just go to the game for the time, not the baseball part of it, and that's the Coors effect that kind of
and you know what
affects it. You know,
I mean, I'll be dead honest with you guys, and it might piss people off who are listening to this, but Colorado, I'm not going to say all of you guys. There are some Colorado fans that are just terrible baseball fans. They just don't understand the game. You know, I always give this example of the story. We were in St. Louis. This was '07. And Matt Holliday had just flied out to deep right field. And it was a sac fly, moved a runner from second to third. When he came back to the dugout, the Cardinals fans behind our dugout were sitting there and applauding him for hitting a sac fly. And I looked over at whoever was standing next to him, was Taylor Buckle or somebody. I said, they would have booed his ass in Colorado for not hitting a bomb. Like it's just, it's a different understanding of the game. And I feel like there are some good hardcore baseball fans who understand baseball, but the casual fan who's going to Coors Field is not there for baseball or doesn't understand baseball enough. They just want to see bombs and drink beers.
Yeah. And I just got one point I got to make off of this. So everybody's really frustrated with the front office, especially with the Nato move and the writing on the wall with the Story and all of those things. And you have the hardcore fans that are saying, oh, well, let's boycott and let's do this and that. That's never going to happen. Every single time I've ever been to a Rockies game, there's 5 little league teams walking across the warning track, you know, from Wyoming and Nebraska and Colorado and all these things. And it's old guys coming out there to just, enjoy the scenery and with their family and blah, blah, blah. That's never going to change. Boycotting, whatever.
Regardless of the product on the field, there will be 30,000 butts in the seats every summer night that there's a game.
And Miami Marlins have 2 world championships, just so
just put that on record. The respect is real. I know we've gone over our time with you, Jason.
You're good,
I appreciate you being here. We'll end it with this. It's a little lightheartedness here. I have 2 questions for you. The first one, do you remember who you got your 3 hits off of?
Yes.
Who?
2 of them were off Tom Glavine. I remember that because it was the same game. It was an infield single. I beat it out. And it was a bases loaded single down the right field line that should have been a double. And I have no idea why Sean Green was playing so damn close to the line. And then my very first hit was off of, is it Brian Bannister?
Yep.
Yeah, it was Brian Bannister with the Royals. I still have the baseball at my house. And it says, so when you get your first anything, the very first, whoever's the trickster in the clubhouse will put a ball in your locker that has everything wrong on it, just to try and get a reaction out of you. So I had a ball in my locker. It said, first major league hit, soft fly ball to right field that any good outfielder would have caught. Said it right there on the ball. And yeah, so I still have that, but I remember he threw me, I don't know, it was a cutter or something like that. And I just, closed my eyes and swung, and it ended up in right center. And I was on first base. That was my first big league hit.
Hey, it counts.
It does.
And don't sell yourself short. You also got 2 RBIs off Tom Glavine. Make sure you put that in there.
You know why I got a hit off Tom Glavine? Here's what I tell people. Because he threw my speed. It was end of his career, Tom Glavine, who was throwing like, 84, 85. I will tell you this, though. He did throw me a changeup, and I swung out of my ass. And I shit you not, I felt like I dislocated my shoulder because I swung so damn hard at it. I wanted to hit that ball so flipping hard. And then the ball that I did hit down the right field line, even if it was at 85 miles an hour, I was so late on it. That was the only place I was ever going to get a hit, was down that line, because Carlos Delgado had 0 mobility at first base. And he gave it the old, like, oh, I'm falling over as I'm moving towards the line. I'll just let it go.
That's awesome. And then the last question, do you have any inkling to pitch again, maybe for the Denver Browns or anything?
I'll tell you what, Matt Replinger puts me on the roster.
Man.
Oh yeah, he puts me on the roster every year just in case I feel the itch to come out of retirement. I will tell you this, I have not thrown a ball in any regularity. It's probably been 6 or 7 years. I mean, I can play catch, but I ain't going to pitch. It's going to look ugly. I'm not going to be able to wipe my ass in the morning if I do.
Be a little sore.
So, I mean, if I do, I'm getting back in shape. I'm a big outdoorsman now. And so I'm trying to, archery season's coming up here in September. And so I'm trying to get back into shape. I'm lifting in the gym, and I'm like, you know what? Maybe I'll start throwing the ball around a little bit just to see. The problem is, as we discussed earlier in this broadcast, I'm a small business owner, and I spend so much damn time sitting on my ass doing administrative work that I could be doing out on the floor, throwing and getting myself into shape. So if one of you guys would like to participate as a administrator for my company, as a unpaid intern and answer emails and pay my bills, I'm happy to get my arm back in shape and potentially entertain a comeback with the Browns.
We'll reach out to Rep for you and see if he can find somebody. I don't know if that's our alley. I don't know if that's what we're doing.
Did he tell you guys like about the well, I think he did it was on Christmas, where he did like this big signing. He was going to come to my house, like it was a publisher's clearinghouse thing, like this giant contract, and have me create this giant press release about how Jason Hirsh is signing with the Browns to play for the 2021 season.
He did not mention that.
Oh yeah, that was in the works. I don't know if it clearly never happened. I think he put out the press release, but he never showed up to my door with his camera crew.
We'll have to get on him on that. That's awesome. Thank you again, Jason, for coming. I really appreciate you being here, talking rocks, talking baseball, and just doing the thing at Fast Baseball.
Thanks, man. Anytime you guys want to do this again, let me know. I'm happy to join you. Don't be scared, man. We're real people.
Yes, you are.
Yeah.
Thanks, man. Enjoy your evening.
See you guys.
Thanks, Jason.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you for watching. Find us on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple's Podcast, or Google Podcast by looking up Lake Street Banter. Thank you.